Well, hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I'm back. I hope you guys are doing fantastic out there. I've got an interesting video for you today. As you can see, I've got my clipboard with my notes. We're going to talk about Alone, Season 9, Episode 2. And we're going to start with one of my favorite parts of the show, and that is the quote that comes on the screen at the beginning of each episode. The quote is, "Don't feel entitled to anything you didn't sweat and struggle for." This is a quote by Marion Wright Edelman. She was the first African-American woman to pass the bar in Mississippi. She's an activist for civil and children's rights, and she is the founder of the Children's Defense Fund. So let's go back to that quote again, because it's very important. Don't feel entitled to anything you didn't sweat and struggle for. Now, how does that come into play with the show, in my opinion? Everybody out there on the show is ready to earn everything that they get. They're ready to put the work in. So when it comes to the participants of Alone, this quote really does apply, because they are not the entitled crowd. They're ready to put themselves out there on national television that's going to be broadcast probably worldwide, and their whole life, their whole experience, everything that they do, failures, successes, all of that. So they have thick skin. They have to be out there and to be putting yourself out there and everything that you do. So I give all the participants credit for doing that, for our enjoyment. We're going to rewind all the way back to day one. We're going to meet new characters, new participants. Okay, so we're going to start on day one with Adam, and it's drop time. It's launch time. They're just getting dropped off, and the first things out of their mouth, he says, "What am I doing here?" Then we meet Tom. My first impression of Tom is he was thin. And I'm looking at some of the other participants, and they got more body fat than him. So I think Tom, right out the gate, is going to have his work cut out for him in the form of securing calories to compete with these other participants. First words out of Tom's mouth, "I can't believe I get to do this." Terry, let's meet Terry. First words out of his mouth, "I'm in disbelief that I'm allowed to be here." And then we meet Temujin. His words are much different, in my opinion, than the previous words that we just talked about. His first words are, "Now it's just me, let's get to work." So I gotta pause right there for a second. Drop shock is real. Temujin seems to be mentally prepared for this. His first words are, "Let's get to work." He's ready to earn everything that he gets on the show. So that is impressive to me. And I'm not discounting the other participants. I'm just saying Temujin stood out to me with his initial statement. I thought that that was very, very good. It gives me a glimpse of his mental going into the show on launch, because I know that that's got to be nerve-wracking. I've applied for the show multiple times, and many people have done that, and the few that get selected are probably like, uh-oh, what now? I'm actually here, and that's what we're seeing. But not with Temujin. He's got 10 years of experience, and right now he's looking for a good shelter location. He spent 6 years in the Canadian Armed Forces, specializing in cold weather warfare and survival. So I think this is going to give him a slight edge against some of the other participants, because I think Temujin is going to understand the value of body's core temperature, maybe some of the wildlife, maybe some of the edibles and plants and stuff like that. I think he's going to have a little bit more going for him than some of the others. And that doesn't mean he's going to win or anything like that. It just means he's got stuff going on for him. So Temujin, thank you for your service, for serving your country. He's a veteran, as I said. And he's also a general practice doctor, which is very interesting. For the first time, I think, in the history of Alone, we have somebody who has a very, very interesting thing to bring into the game, and that is the ability to fix himself. In fact, he said something to that effect. He said, if I get hurt or something out here, I'll repair myself before they even get to me, you know. So that knowledge of being able to get himself out of a predicament if he gets hurt or something like that, it's got to boost his confidence going into the show. So he's got a lot of good things going for him. Then they showed some footage. It was like casting footage or something like that that he had. And he was cutting some wood. And my man had a Makita, it looked like a Makita circular saw. So I got to stop the episode right now. And I'm going to declare Temujin the winner. Hands down, he wins the show. Because he has a Makita. Now how does that correlate to winning alone? It don't. It's just me being funny, right? I think the guy knows his things about power tools. I'm a diehard Makita fan. Thumbs up to Temujin for that. So let's get moving back to the show. He decides he's going to put up a shelter. He puts a ridge line up between two trees with paracord, and he drapes the tarp over the paracord, creating an A-frame tarp shelter. Very smart, very quick, easy, down and dirty, get it done kind of thing. And I was impressed because I think that's something very similar that I would have done. I would have done like a plow point, maybe an A-frame, but in the wet environment that they're in, I thought it was very smart that he didn't waste a lot of calories and time on shelter yet. It seems like he's being frugal. At least that's the interpretation that I'm getting from it. And it looks good. So I'm impressed with him. I like his character. So let's move forward. We're on day 2. It's about 9:30 in the morning. We're talking about Terry. He sees a harbor seal and he's looking around, and the first thing that comes to my mind, okay, so we know that rivers eventually lead to oceans. And for him to see a harbor seal, it makes me wonder if he's closer to the ocean than the other participants. And if that's the case, is he going to have access to limpets and things like that? Is he going to find Dungeness crabs? Or, I mean, is he... I don't know. All I know is he's closer to the ocean, at least it looks that way, than the other participants. And then the next question comes to my mind is, can they harvest a seal? Think of all the things that you can get off of a seal. The blubber, the meat, the bones, all the things that you can use in survival if you can take a seal. So I don't know what the rules are for this season for taking a seal, but it definitely raises some awareness and some questions for people to think about. He was a commercial fisherman in Alaska, and then he says something about his strategy or something, or his plan. I'm going to make it at least 30 days. My goal is 30 days or more, or something like that. And that raised a flag for me, because I'm thinking when he throwed out that number of 30 days, that puts a cap on it. I'm thinking, wow, maybe I'm wrong, but I just found interest in that. So he decides that he wants to boil water. He wants to work on his shelter, and that's kind of his priorities for the next couple of days, which I think is a good priority set. And then he goes out and does his scouting or whatever. I don't know what he's doing. Just know that whatever we see on the screen is this much, and they film like this much. So what we see is just minimal to what they do out there. So the reason I'm saying that is because he left his tinder pile out and it got wet. I'm sure the armchair quarterbacks are going to be out there saying, this guy's an idiot. You know, he should have done this and he should have done that. And you know, he's out there. We just have to trust his judgment. There are some things that he could have done to keep the tinder dry. He may have been able to put it, you know, underneath his clothing as long as he's not sweating, or put it in a pocket or something like that. That would have probably helped out the situation. Now, he left it in the rain, and as a result of this decision, and again, we don't know what he was out doing. He might have been scouting for a location or looking for game, or he might have been eating berries. We don't know. All we know is what the editors cut into the show. So, as a result, he is having trouble making a fire, which brings to mind, if you guys haven't seen my bow drill friction fire tutorial, I talk about this, and that is sometimes when you want to find the driest part of a piece of wood, it's generally inside of that wood, whether it's dead and standing or something dead leaning against another something that has airflow under it. So those are the things that we want to look for when we're going to try to create fire and it's inclement weather and we're dealing with wet things. We want to try to do that. So I'm not seeing him do any of these things, but that doesn't mean that he didn't try. That doesn't mean, that's just, again, that shows what the editors put into the show. And of course, they're probably going to put the most irritating thing because they're looking for people to be entertained. So let's move forward. It's 47 degrees out. We're still on day 2. We're still talking about Terry. And he tells the camera, he says, I'm embarrassing myself. He's thirsty. He's embarrassing himself because he's trying so hard to make a fire and he can't. And it is what it is. You know, people come from all over to go out there to the Alone show. And you could even put someone like myself. I can make thousands of friction fires here in Arizona, and you put me up in Canada where they get 60 inches of rain a year. I might struggle making fire too. So it is what it is. I think he's doing good, but he's struggling, and he's acknowledging it. He's thirsty. And then he says this. He says, why did this guy make it when so many others did not? He's talking about people like me. Here I am out here, and there's, you know, thousands of other people that would have loved to have my spot, and I can't even make a dang fire out here. The casting department, they select the people based on certain criteria, and he got selected, so he's out there. I don't harbor any bad feelings or anything like that for him being there. I think the story's going to get to unfold, and we're going to get to see more and more about him. And then he answers this question that he just asked himself. He says, I sure hope that I can stick around and show everybody why I'm out here. So I thought that that was good. One thing that I really like about the show is the ebb and flow. Meaning you'll see the downs of things and you'll see the ups of things. So you'll see people fail and then you'll see people succeed. And I like it when they do that. So like on him, we got to see him kind of take a dip, and now we're seeing him rise. And I'm talking about that in reference to his mindset. So let's move forward. We're on day 3. It's about 9 in the morning. We're talking about Tom. It is 40 degrees outside. He's eating bunch berries, and he decides he's going to go scout for food. Now, his experience, he did prescribed burns before the show, and I guess they're burning the wilderness so that the new growth can come up and it helps stimulate new growth or something like that. So he says his approach to hunting is to be an observer, to pay attention, to take his time. And I think that's very smart, and I think that's a very valuable approach to it. He's tracking a squirrel. He takes a shot with the bow. Boom, he nails a squirrel. And then he says he wishes that his dad was around. He's proud. I think that he's wishing that he could share that proud moment with someone who he loves. I didn't do any studying before doing these videos this time, so everything is fresh to me. So I'm paying special attention to certain little things like what kind of pot or cooking thing did they bring. And I noticed that Tom brought a Dutch oven. So let's move forward to day 5. It's almost 9 o'clock in the morning. We're going to see Adam, and he was a treehouse carpenter, and he also was a professional shearer of alpacas. And this next thing is huge. He did 90 days sailing across the ocean on a sailboat. And I think he said he did that by himself. That, in my opinion, is huge for his mental toughness going into a challenge like Alone. Because I think he would have faced all kinds of things. You really have to be, I guess what I'm saying is you have to have this quality of you in your personality to like yourself. And him experiencing 90 days on the ocean on a sailboat, I think he got to do that. He got to cry, he got to laugh, he got to sing, he got to burp, he got to fart, he got headaches, he got whatever he went through. So all these adversities and things that he's found out about himself and learned, he is now taking that as a tool with him on Alone against competitors or people that he's, the other participants. I don't know if they're bringing that same bag of experience that Adam is bringing with him. So I think he's a little bit up on the participants for that in the aspect of mental toughness. Okay, so I think it's going to help him out. So he decides that he's going to build a lean-to. So he cuts a bunch of logs down and he builds a really nice ridge pole. It's got some skeletons against it. He's got his tarp laying up there, and he decides to put some boughs on top of the tarp, and he kind of thatches like a roof, like shingling effect. He starts at the bottom and works his way up, and that's good. It's going to serve a few purposes. One, it's going to help, keep the rain off. Of course, the tarp will do that. But the second thing is, if something falls, it's going to hit the debris, the boughs, before it'll hit the tarp. So it might serve as a little bit of protection for the tarp. And in the event that there's some heavy sun or UV light or something on the tarp, because there's boughs covering the tarp, it's going to minimize that UV exposure and stuff that would wear out a tarp earlier, which I don't think they're going to deal with that, because I think they're going to have a lot of shade and stuff like that up there. So that one doesn't really apply too much. But the last one is, those boughs are an insulative factor. So if it snows on top of those boughs, the snow is going to stay there. The boughs are going to basically hold that snow, and that's going to be insulation. So his shelter has the potential to be warm. So I thought that was very, very cool. Another thing that I noticed was he made a raised bed. So he's up off the ground. So anytime you lay on the ground, you have heat loss through conduction, and that's where the heat from the smaller, warmer body is absorbed into the larger, colder body. So the heat gets zapped from you. The fact that he made a raised bed, very smart, because now he's not going to face heat loss through conduction, and his body core temperature is going to be able to be regulated a little bit easier. So I think that he's on a roll. His shelter looks good, and he's doing great things. So we're going to move forward to day 6, a little bit after 7 o'clock in the morning. We're talking about Terry. It's 39 degrees outside. He's got his Dutch oven full of water, got a nice little fire behind him, so we know that he got fire now. He's drinking water. His whole morale has changed. He's happy, and I thought that was cool. It's good to see him come back to life. It's good to see the battery get recharged, so to speak. It's good to see that life force come back into his body. Another thing that comes to mind is when a person is out there and they're struggling with starvation, sometimes you can fake the body into thinking you're full by staying hydrated. Now, I know that doesn't really do anything for nutrition and calories and weight loss and ketosis and all that, but it does help at least your mental state in some aspects. So very interesting there. And so he decides to make an A-frame tarp shelter with a ridge pole. So I thought that was cool. He decides to go fishing, and he gets one nice fish. It looked like it was a brook trout. So Terry's doing good. He kind of bounced back. We saw him fall a little. Now we're seeing him rise. So it was good. Now we're moving forward. It's about 1 o'clock now. We're actually on day 7 now, and we're talking about Temujin. 33 degrees outside. So it's just barely above freezing. He's working on the fire pit. So he's digging with a stick, and he's going to make something that looks similar to a Dakota fire hole. But his has 2 little pipes instead of 1. And the way a Dakota works is almost like a rocket stove. It has an air draw that it produces, and it's a very nice fire to use for a stealth kind of fire. It's a very efficient fire. It burns like all the wood. But his has a secondary hole going out, and he says something to the effect that that'll help with the exhaust or something like that, help the smoke go out or something. I'm not real familiar with that, but I'm interested to see how that works. I've done Dakota fire holes before, and they work good, so I'm interested in that. Another thing that I'm thinking about is he knows how to make a warm shelter with all that experience that he's had, and he does something that proves that. He goes down to the river and he gets clay, and he brings clay up, and he's putting clay around his hearth, I guess you could call it, his fire pit, and that's cool. That clay is going to harden, and anytime he has a fire in there, that clay as a thermal mass is going to retain heat. So even if the fire gets weak or even goes out, that heat is going to dissipate into his shelter throughout the night. And I think that's going to be very smart. And then he says something very interesting. He says, I want to experience new things out here, and I want to grow from them. That's huge to me. That tells me that Temujin understands the trade-off of adversity to growth. So I'm going to go through some adversity and give that, and in return I get to grow. And he's prepared to do it. He's signed up for it, and I think that that's cool, and I think that that shows a lot of mental fortitude that he has. So let's move forward. We're on day 8. We're talking about Tom. It's almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He takes his hat off. He's got green hair and pink hair that he dyed before he went out there on the show. And I'm thinking, what's this guy doing? What's this all about? Is he a punk rocker? Is he stuck in the 80s? What's going on with this green and pink hair? And then I realized, after watching the show a little more, that he is a genius. He dyed his hair to bring in those colored fibers so he could make streamer flies for fishing. What? I wouldn't have thought of that. So I'm very impressed with that. He says they didn't look very good. It showed the flies, but I thought they looked good. He went out and tested them, and he got a fish, and I think he ended up getting 3 fish from these flies that he made using his hair. He cut his hair off for that. He didn't care about losing his hair and all that, but I just thought that was impressive. And I thought that was a very nice way to think outside of the box, because I surely wouldn't have thought of that. I was impressed. So let's move forward. Day 10. We're talking about Jacques. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning, 44 degrees outside. He's fishing. He got a fish, and he said something that I really admire, something that I really respect. He said, when I get something, whether it's a fish or an animal, I like to kill it and clean it very quickly. I respect that tremendously, because to me that shows that he understands and appreciates the value of life and the gift that that is. And it also impresses me because he has enough respect for Mother Nature that he's willing to dispatch that animal quickly so that it doesn't have to suffer. And that says a lot about his character as a human being, and I'm impressed by that. So mad respect to Jacques for that. And then he says, I don't know how long I'll last out here. And then he says, getting out here is beyond my wildest dreams. Those thoughts are interesting. I don't know how long I'm going to last. And being out here is a dream come true, basically. And I can attest to that second one and the first one, because there's so many variables out there. You really don't know. It's the unknown. I mean, I guess the only thing you can think about is don't quit. Don't quit. But that's harder to do than to say. And he decides that he's going to cook this fish over the fire, and he's happy about it. I don't think I would have chose to cook my fish over the fire on a stick like he did. I mean, fat and stuff drips off of the fish and it goes onto the fire, and you're losing those valuable nutrients, those omega-3s and the fats that you need in your body. And when you're playing a real life game of Hunger Games, you need every drop of fat that fish will provide. So my opinion would have been, put that fish in a pot, have some fish head soup. That would have been what I would have done. But he's happy about it. and he feels like he's killing it out there. But then he says, I can't shake this want to be with my family. He's got a girlfriend back home and a dog, and he's missing them. And he says, I just don't know how to shake it. How to shake that feeling. And that brings up the power of words. That's what I think about, the power of words. When a person says something, they give power to that. If they say something negative, they give power to negative. If they say something out of their mouth that's positive, they give power to positive. So I think people that go out there on the show, they have to be very careful about the power of words that come out of their mouth. So when a person starts doubting themselves or struggling and they voice that, all they're doing is giving it power. That's just my opinion. So we're moving forward. We're on day 11. It's about 10 o'clock. We're talking about Adam, and he says, this is the moss house. He's hungry, so he decides he's going to go scout for some hunting and see if there's anything potential for hunting. He finds some bear scat. That's a good sign. You know, there's bears in his area. And then he says something that I thought was cool. He said, it's a dream of mine to kill my first black bear. And I thought that was cool. He spoke that, right? That's positive. He's speaking about getting food. Then he says another thing that's very powerful. And again, he speaks this, right? He says, every day I get to be out here, it's a blessing. So his mind and thought process, in my opinion, is very good. His head is in a good place based on the things that he's saying. So then he sees a grouse, and he pulls out his bow and he takes a shot. And I think he had a broadhead or a blunt tipped arrow, excuse me. And I noticed the fletchings were short fletchings. They weren't the big ones that slows an arrow down and makes it a short range arrow. If I saw it correctly, they were short fletchings, which made it long arrows for distance. And I think one of them was a blunt. And then he took a second shot, and I think the second one was a broadhead. So he misses the grouse on both shots, and he cannot find his arrows. And that's a huge loss on something like Alone, because the participants are only allowed 9 arrows total for the whole time they're out there. So he's down to 7 arrows now, and that's very detrimental. Not saying that he can't hunt. I mean, all it takes is 1 arrow to kill a bear, but still, he's lessening his odds, and that's got to be frustrating. And he said something about those arrows might have went over and landed underneath the moss. You know, they like went under, and that's possible. So that's unfortunate for him, for Adam. So we're moving forward. We're on day 12. It's 10:30. We're talking about Jacques, and he pulls up his shirt. He's kind of showing his belly and his body, and he's talking about the weight loss. He's talking about, you know, losing weight and stuff, and he's lost about 10% of his body weight at this point. And then he goes to cut some firewood, and I was thinking, dude, you know, I wish there was a different option. Maybe break the firewood, because all this sawing and cutting, that's just more calorie expenditure, and that's going to equate to more weight loss. So I would have liked to have seen a different method of cutting the wood, but it is what it is. He does what he needs to do. He does what he knows, and that's what we're seeing on the screen. Then he hears something, so he gets his bow, and he picks up 2 arrows, and he sees a squirrel. He takes a shot, he misses. Takes a second shot, and he gets the squirrel. Now this is where things get very interesting. So he kills the squirrel, and then he gets sad and emotional a little bit because of killing the squirrel. You know, it just reflects again on his value for life. And I'm not discounting him, but it kind of shows his inexperience a little bit with things. A person that grew up hunting, or like I grew up on a farm. We had 4 horses, we had 3 pigs, we had about 100 chickens, we had turkeys, we had a cow, we had dogs. So I saw life and I saw death, and that was valuable. I we as human beings, I don't think, ever lose the value for life. But when you see death, it makes you accept it easier, I guess you could say. So for him, when he killed this squirrel, it really bothered him because he saw, you know, the squirrel die, and kind of traumatic, you know, I guess. So and then he starts speaking. Remember the power of words. He starts speaking about being alone with your thoughts out there, and it's very heavy on him. And that just goes back to the fellow that was on the sailboat. He's already been alone. He's already known how to deal with some of these adversities that we're seeing Jacques go through right now. So very interesting right there. It's kind of heavy on Jacques right now. So we're moving forward to day 12, and here we go with Adam again. It's almost 3 o'clock. He decides that he's going to make a new fishing pole. And I'm just blown away by this, because he's got his legs open like this, and he's got the pole right between his legs, and he's got his axe, and he's debarking this pole right in between his legs. And I'm sitting here cringing, because when I teach survival classes to people, first thing I teach is blade safety. Stay out of that triangle of death. All your cutting needs to be on the outside of your legs. You don't want to get into that femoral artery in between your legs. If you cut that, you could bleed out. I mean, you could get to the radio and tap out and call for emergency rescue, but by the time they get to you, you could bleed out and be dead. That's scary. I'm not discounting his experience, and that brings up another thought. There was a video that I did a few years back, and I had a little cordless grinder in my hand, and I had like I think it was a Bud Light alcohol stove or something video I was making. And I had the grinder really close to my fingers. And people in the comments didn't like that. They said I was dangerous. They were freaking out and stuff like that. The difference between cutting a finger and your main artery, that's different. I mean, you cut your finger, you put a rag over it, put pressure on it, and you're fine. You cut that main artery, and you don't know how to put a tourniquet onto that location, I'm saying it could be very, very bad. So then we got Timoji out there. He being a doctor, if something happened to him, he could probably fix it. You know, he could probably take care of himself. And I don't know, it just raises awareness, because I like Adam. I think he's doing good things. So then he did something very smart. He took the tarp and he took the metal grommets off of the tarp, and he's going to use those for guides on his fishing rod for the string. So the string will go through these grommets on his pole. He decides he's going to go out and test this fishing rod, and it's a nice rod that he made. He got a fish, then there's a second one, and it kind of reminds me of what happened last episode. How many fish did that fella catch? Well, now Adam's doing that. He's fish after fish after fish. I think he got a total of 11 fish, I think. And then later he's talking about, he's in his shelter, and he says, I put 10 in the pan and I'm eating them, and then I'm smoking that big large one over the fire. I thought that it was cool that he invested those calories into his body right away, and he saved a little bit. So he was very smart he didn't ration it. He didn't do anything like that. He ate the food. You know, it's good to stay as healthy as you can, as long as you can. If you start trying to ration, and I think that's a recipe for going the wrong direction, in my opinion. So then he's got a piece of wood between his legs again, and he's making a wooden spoon. I think he's got like a multi-tool or a knife or something. And again, he's right there in that death triangle with that blade, and I'm cringing, but again, I'm not out there. I got to trust his judgment and hope that he's got good blade control and stuff like that. So his knife safety skills scare me. And I don't mean that to discount him. I'm just saying what I see on the show. So then he says something, again, words spoken are powerful. He said, every day out there is a gift. I'm not going anywhere. So his mental is solid. I like him. So now we're moving forward. We're on day 14. We're talking about Jacques, and he's saying, I'm thinking about that squirrel that I shot. I feel wrong about it. He's sad about it. He says he doesn't like hurting animals. He doesn't like killing. And then he says something really smart. He says, I don't know what I'm chasing out here anymore. He says, I have a family at home. Then he says something to the effect of, I think I'm going to run home to what's important instead of running away from what's important. So he's learned the value of his girl, his dog, and he had a little ring that he made around his finger. So last I knew, he was engaged. I don't know, he might be married by now. I don't know. But I thought that that was cool because he got something valuable out of his experience on Alone, and that was he learned the value of his girl and his dog and what's important. And then he says, I'm missing the moments with my family, and that time will never be replaced. I'll never get that time back. So then he taps. He quits. And then he says, it's good. It feels good. I made the right decision, and I'm not leaving here with any regrets. There's a couple factors I think that we're dealing with Jacques. He's a young guy. I think he's 23. I think he's the youngest one on this season. So he doesn't have like a lot of the experiences some of the other participants do. I mean, he didn't spend 90 days at sea by himself. He's not a doctor. I mean, so he's a young guy learning. And he learned a valuable thing. He learned the value of his girlfriend, his dog, right? And he had some life trauma. If I remember correctly, he said something about his dad was an alcoholic or something like that. So he's learned from that too. All the things that you got under the hood will be exposed when you're out there suffering. If you got anything haunting you or something, you're going to find that. And he did. So I think that his experience on the show was a positive one. I really do. And, you know, I know that there's going to be a lot of armchair quarterbacks saying, oh, Jacques, he quit too soon and he didn't do this and he didn't do that. And Jacques, if you're watching, I think you did amazing for your age and what you dealt with and what you did out there. And I want to say thank you for sharing your story with us, for our entertainment, putting yourself out there, having thick enough skin, because the armchair quarterbacks are going to come at you and they're going to try to tear you down. But you know what, man? You were out there and you did a good job. I think so. You lasted 14 days. If you had been maybe 40 years old or something and went out there on the show, you would have probably done a lot more. So I think it's amazing. And I want to remind you of Dr. Seuss, because those armchair quarterbacks are going to be on you. I'm not going to be one of them, but Dr. Seuss says, those that mind don't matter, and the people that matter, they don't mind. So again, thank you for what you showed us and all the participants. Episode 2 was a great episode. Folks, I want to say thank you for watching this show today, my commentary on Season 9, Episode 2. I hope you got some good, useful information out of this video. Please feel free to drop your comments down below. I love to read them. I love hearing your thoughts on what's going on the show. I read them all. So with all that being said, folks, again, thank you so much for watching. Please know that every Wednesday I drop a video at a bare minimum. It's always on Wednesday mornings, so at a bare minimum. And until next time, have a beautiful day. We'll see you on episode 3. Again, thanks for watching. Bye for now.